So I'd like to talk a little bit about your assignment for today as distance learners, but also like to talk about the Boston Tea Party in a more general sense. You know, the Boston Tea Party is a story that people have heard of for a long time. You've probably heard about it before today. Unfortunately, you may have heard a lot of myth about the Boston Tea Party. And so we're going to try to explain facts today. Facts that we get from sources of people who were actually there and did the Boston Tea Party event. One of the big myths that a lot of people have always heard or been taught about the Boston Tea Party is that the Tea Party is done, and people throw tea overboard in Boston Harbor to destroy the tea because they're upset about a tax on tea that makes tea more expensive. Well, that's not true. We're not mad about an increase in the price of tea. The residents of Boston are mad about a decrease in the price of tea. The price of tea has gone down, and we don't like it. How in the world could that be true, would you say? Why, how in the world could we be upset about a price going down, especially the price of tea that a lot of people in the colonies drink every day? Well, here's the story. Uh, Joint stock companies are companies that built colonies around the world. The Virginia Company settled Virginia. The Massachusetts Bay Company settled Massachusetts. There are, a lot of these things. One of those joint stock companies is called the East India Company. Well, the East India Company sells tea in the colonies, and a lot of other companies do too. They get that tea from East India. Tea doesn't grow here in America, so it has to be brought here from somewhere else. Well, the East India Company has a lot of big name investors in England, including the king. And unfortunately, for a lot of reasons, that East India Company is doing really badly and they're about to go out of business. They've made some really bad financial decisions. There's a lot of corruption in the company. There are a lot of things not going right. So the East India Company is on the way down. And that means the king is going to lose a lot of money. And some of his good friends in Parliament are going to lose a lot of money. They don't like it. So here's what they're going to do. Members of Parliament who have invested in the East India Company will go to King George III and say, look, King, we don't want to lose our money. You don't want to lose your money. Do us a big favor here to save the company. What we want you to do, King, is take away the tax on tea just for the East India Company. Not for every company that sells tea, but just for the East India Company. Well, the king agrees to this. That means the price of East India Company tea goes down while every other company's tea has to stay at the same price because they have to pay a tax. The king and members of parliament think, hey, the Americans will be happy because the price of tea is going to go down if they buy it from the East India Company. Well, people in America are too smart for that. We can see right through this plan. And what are we seeing? We're seeing the king is doing favors for himself and his friends, and he wants the Americans to pay for it. He wants Americans to bail out the East India Company by buying their tea, while every other company has to struggle because no one will buy theirs that is still taxed. And that's why the American colonists are mad. So here's how things go. The people in Boston in particular decide, all right, how can we keep East India tea from being sold in Boston? Simple. Don't unload it off the tea ships. When ships come into Boston Harbor, which almost everything comes in by water, for the city of 30,000 some people, that's almost completely surrounded by water. So everything comes in by water, and so the people who unload ships, and the Sons of Liberty and some other people, and Sam Adams and John Hancock, they kind of get together and come up with this plan. Unload everything off those ships, but not the tea. Well, of course, the king and friends get mad, and they say, you better unload the tea off those ships. Those ships are going to sit in Boston Harbor until they're unloaded. They're not allowed to leave. Well, that's bad for a lot of people because eventually, if this continues, Boston Harbor is going to be full of ships that no one will unload. That's going to cause a problem because there's just no room for anything else to come into the harbor. People are out of work who can't unload ships. Ship captains make money by traveling across the ocean. They don't make money by sitting in a harbor. It's going to be bad news. So the king is mad. The government of Massachusetts, which is run by the king, is mad. The American citizens of Boston are mad. Everybody's kind of going at it with each other because nobody's going to give in. King saying ships have to be unloaded. People of Boston saying we're not unloading any ships. All kinds of problems. Well, Samuel Adams and some friends get together and they decide, all right, let's solve this in our own special way. Let's pull a funny prank. Let's dress up like Mohawks. Let's go down to the harbor. Let's dump the tea in the harbor because that makes both sides happy. The king gets his ships unloaded, but the tea doesn't actually come into the city of Boston to be sold. Everybody gets what they want, right? Well, that's what the Boston Tea Party is. It's a protest to a decrease in the price of tea. And the Boston Tea Party is a way of, well, solving a problem in a clever, creative, funny way. Well, the British government won't think this is funny and creative. They're going to punish Boston with a pretty severe punishment for the Boston Tea Party. Today's job, though, is to actually do a skill of looking at a primary source and a secondary source and analyzing them. When you analyze something, you break it down into its individual parts. Now, when you analyze something, you're reading it, looking for details within the bigger picture of the thing you're reading. So in this case, what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open this assignment here, and you'll see the job you are to do. And that job is, when this all opens, you're going to be reading two different sources about the Boston Tea Party and providing an analysis. Meaning you're going to break those sources down a little bit into their different parts. Now, instructions go like this. You're going to read a secondary source first. Remember, a secondary source is written by someone who didn't actually see an event happen. They're writing about it much later, kind of looking back at it. So you're going to read a secondary source about the Boston Tea Party that has a lot of different facts. You're just going to record any 8 facts. There are lots of facts about the Boston Tea Party in this article, so you don't have to think too hard about it. I'll just give you an example. The phrase "a cold December night" is at the beginning of the article, so that's right in the first sentence. That's a fact. There are plenty of other facts, so as you read them, you're writing down 8 facts about the Boston Tea Party from the secondary source document. Then you're going to read a primary source. A primary source is written by someone who actually saw an event. They lived it. They was part of their own personal experience. That primary source is written by a man who helped dump tea in the harbor. He's kind of telling his little piece of the story that he knows from what he did. As you read that, you're going to list 5 facts that you read in the primary source that you didn't read about in the secondary source. A lot of times, a primary source has details that only people who participated in an event would know. Maybe somebody writing about it much, much later would not know unless they saw it in someone else's primary source. So that's our job, is to analyze a secondary and a primary source, looking for facts, looking for some details in that primary source that are not recorded in the secondary source. So if I back up just a bit here in Canvas, you'll read the secondary source, which is written by somebody after the event. You will then read the primary source and record some facts, some details that aren't in the secondary source. Activity number 5 says, be sure to turn in this document. Be sure you submit it. Be sure you save your work. Things are a little different sometimes with Canvas that it doesn't automatically save, so you need to make sure you do that. Okay? And after you've done that, for your main lesson for today, I'd like you to watch a video of September 11th from the History Channel. So if I move myself over here, the History Channel has a lot of good material on it. And so you're watching a video about the Twin Towers in New York City, the World Trade Center. It's a sad day, really, in American history. 19 years ago, the attacks happened in New York City, in Washington, D.C., and in Somerset, Pennsylvania, or near Somerset, Pennsylvania. Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where actually my brother-in-law was working on an elementary school, the building project, and he's an electrician. And the plane crashed not far from the school where he was working. He was busy working. He didn't understand what happened until he just kept hearing sirens and sirens and sirens and all kinds of noise going on. Finally, somebody had told them that about a plane crashing into a field not far from the school where he was working. So, finish up today by doing some September 11th. All right, that's what you're headed for today. Hope you have a good weekend. I'll see you next week as we get ready to get closer and closer to the Revolutionary War and eventually do a test on colonies and the road to the revolution.